your 11.5 notes, go over Kramer's rule. Kramer's rule is just another method in order to solve systems. So the way that you're going to do this is you're going to find D, D sub x, and D sub y. D sub x goes over D, D sub y goes over D. When you simplify those, that'll be your answers. When you're working with these matrices, you are going to make sure that you form the matrix given the two equations that you have, or sometimes three, and you're going to cross multiply to find D using just the coefficients of x and y. Then you'll find D sub x by replacing your x values with your answers, and then cross multiplying again, subtracting. Once you find all of them, like I said, put D sub x over D, D sub y over D, comma in between, in parentheses, simplify, that'll be your answer. So what does this mean? If we're working with the function or the system, 2x minus 5y is equal to 3, negative 4x plus 3y is equal to 8, this is going to give you a D matrix of 2, negative 4, negative 5, 3. Your D sub x, you're going to replace the x values with your answers, so that's going to be 3 and 8, and the negative 5 and the 3 is going to stay. And your D sub y is going to get rid of your y values, replace those with your answers. So 2 and negative 4 stay, your negative 5 becomes a 3, your 3 becomes the 8. So to find D, you are going to cross multiply. So 2 times 3 is 6, minus the negative 4 times negative 5 is 20. That gives us a D of negative 14. For D sub x, multiply the 3 times 3, that's 9, minus the 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. Double negatives turn into positives. This gives us 49. Your D sub y, cross multiply 2 times 8 is 16. The negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. This becomes addition to give us 6 and 8, or sorry, 6 and 2, which is 8. The 2 ones give us 2, so that's positive 28. To give your answers, you're going to do D sub x over D, comma, D sub y over D, and write it as an ordered pair. So D sub x is 49 over D, which is negative 14. D sub y is 28 over D, which is negative 14. We're going to simplify these. The 49 and the 14, they're both divisible by 7. So the 49 would become 7. The 14 would become 2. So that's going to be negative 7 over 2, comma, 28 over negative 14 is negative 2. For your next part, you have 4x minus 2y is equal to 10, and 3x minus 5y is equal to 11. To find D, we're going to use the matrix 4, 3, negative 2, negative 5. To find D sub x, we're going to use the matrix 10, 11, negative 2, negative 5. And to find D sub y, we're going to use 4, 3, 10, 11. To find D, multiply your 4 times negative 5, that's negative 20, minus 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Double negatives turn to positives, so that gives you a negative 14 for D. For D sub x, multiply your 10 times negative 5, that's negative 50. 11 times negative 2 is negative 22. Again, double negatives turn to positives, so you have negative 50 plus 22, which gives us a negative 28. And again, that's D sub x. Then for D sub y, do your 4 times 11, which is 44, minus 3 times 10, which is 30. 44 minus 30 is 14 for D sub y. So your answer is going to be d sub x, bless you, over d, comma, d sub y over d. So this just simplifies to give us negative 28 over negative 14, comma, 14 over negative 14. Both of these terms or fractions simplify to give you 2 comma negative 1. And just like with any system, if you wanted to check this, you can plug in the 2 for x, the negative 1 in for y, and both equations, and you should get true statements for both. For your next example, we now have 3 equations with 3 variables that we are working with. So we're going to use your same kind of method in order to solve this. It's just now we're going to rewrite the first 2 columns on the outside to the right of those matrix. So we have negative x plus z is equal to 4, 2x minus y plus z is equal to negative 3, and y minus 3z is equal to 1. So if we write our first matrix for, let's go do D, we're going to have negative 1, 0, 1, 2, negative 1, 1, and 0, 1, negative 3. First 2 columns have to be rewritten, so that's going to be the negative 1, 2, 0, and 0, negative 1, 1. For d sub x, we're going to use 4, 0, 1. Then we have negative 3, negative 1, 1, and 1, 1, negative 3. Rewrite your first 2 columns. So that's going to be 4, negative 3, 1, and 0, negative 1, 1. For d sub y, we're going to have your negative 1, 2, 0. Your y values change to be 4, negative 3, 1. And your z values are still 1, 1, and negative 3. Rewrite the first 2 columns. Negative 1, 2, 0, 4, negative 3, 1. I don't have, do I? Yeah, I do. All right, so d sub z, we're going to have the first column, negative 1, 2, 0. Second column is going to be 0, negative 1, 1. Third column changes to be your answers of 4, negative 3, 1. And then you rewrite the first 2 columns. So negative 1, 2, 0, and 0, negative 1, 1. All right, starting from D. So we have 4 different matrices that we're working with in order to find D, D sub x, D sub y, and D sub z. For these ones, since there are 4 different ones, you're going to have an answer of D sub x over D, comma, D sub y over D, comma, D sub z over D. So to first find D, we're going to multiply straight across. So starting with the negative 1 times negative 1 times 3. Let's do it this way. I don't like how thick that is. So we're going to go this way first. So we have negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Plus your next one that you multiply is 0 times 1 times 0. That's just 0. Plus your next one is 1 times 2 times 1. That's 2. Minus your bottom to top now. So 0 times negative 1 times 1 is 0. Plus 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Plus negative 3 times 2 times 0 is 0. So from here, your negative 3 plus 0 plus 2 is just negative 1. Your 0 minus 1 is negative 1 plus 0 is just negative 1. Double negatives turn to positives, and we have negative 1 plus 1, which is just 0. From here, we're going to be finding d sub x. So for d sub x, we're going to start with 4 times negative 1 times negative 3. That gives us 4 times 3, which is 12. Then you have 0 times 1, which is 0. And 1 times negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Going from the bottom to the top, you have negative 1 times negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Plus 1 times 4 is 4. Plus negative 3 times 0 is just 0. So your 12 minus 3 gives us 9. Minus negative 1 plus 4 is 3. This gives us a d sub x of 6. To find d sub y, we're going to do 1 times negative 3 times negative 3. So that's negative 9. Plus 4 times 1 times 0 is 0. Plus 1 times 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 0 times negative 3 times 1 is 0. Plus 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Plus negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Times 4 is negative 24. So this is going to give us negative 9 plus 2, which is negative 7, minus the negative 1 times minus 24 is negative 25. Double negatives turn to positives, so that's 25 minus 7, which gives us 18. Next we find d sub z. So we're going to start this one by doing negative 1 times negative 1 times 1. That gives us a positive 1. Plus 0 times negative 3 times 0, which is 0. Plus 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. Minus 0 times negative 1 times 4 is 0. Plus 1 times negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. Plus 1 times 2 times 0 is just 0. So 1 plus 8 is 9. 3 plus 0 is 3. 9 minus 3 gives us a d sub z of 6. So again, we're going to have an answer for this one that is d sub x over d, comma, d sub y over d, comma, d sub z over d. Your d sub x is 6 over d, which is 0, comma, d sub y is 18 over 0, comma, d sub z, which is 6 over 0. These are all undefined. So for this one, because 0 is in the denominator, we have no solution. Could you have been able to tell this from the very beginning? Yes. As soon as you find d, if ever d is equal to 0, it's an automatic no solution. So do you need to do this entire thing? No. Do I do it so that way you can tell why it's no solution? Yes. But again, if you can tell from d that d is equal to 0, you're going to have a 0 in the denominator, and you cannot have 0 in the denominator because it's undefined, automatically it's no solution. For your last example, You have negative x plus 2y minus 3z is equal to 1. 2x plus z is equal to 0. And 3x minus 4y plus 4z is equal to 2. I'm going to start this one by finding d first. By finding d, I'm going to use negative 1, 2, 3, 2, 0, negative 4, and negative 3, 1, 4. I'm going to rewrite the first two columns, so negative 1, 2, 3, and 2, 0, negative 4. We are going to multiply negative 1 times 0 times 4 is 0. 2 times 1 times 3 is 6. Negative 3 times 2 times negative 4 is negative 6 times negative 4, which is positive 24. We're going to subtract that with 3 times 0 times negative 3, which is 0. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 1 is 4. And 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 6 plus 24 gives us 30, minus 4 plus 16 is 20. That gives us a D of 10. So since D is not 0 with this one, we're going to keep going. We're going to find D sub x, D sub y, and D sub z. So to find D sub x, replace your x values with your answers. So it's going to be 1, 0, 2. Everything else is going to stay. So 2, 0, negative 4, negative 3, 1, 4. Rewrite your first two columns. So 1, 0, 2, and 2, 0, negative 4. If we multiply the 1, 0, and 4, that gives us 0. 2, 1, and 2 gives us 4. Negative 3 times 0 times 4, or negative 4, is 0. If we multiply from down up, you have 2 times 0 times negative 3, which is 0. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 1, or sorry, negative 4 times 1 times 1 is negative 4. And then 4 times 0 times 2 is 0. So your 4 plus 0 on the left is just 4. Your negative 4 plus 0 is negative 4. 4 minus negative 4 gives us D sub x is equal to 8. Next, we're finding D sub y. So our x values stay. So we're going to have negative 1, 2, and 3. Y values change to be our answers. So it's going to be 1, 0, 2. Z values stay of negative 1, or sorry, negative 3, 1, and 4. Rewrite the first two columns. Negative 1, 2, 3, and 1, 0, 2. Multiply your negative 1 times 0 times 4 is 0. Your 1 times 1 times 3 is 3. Your negative 3 times 2 is negative 6 times 2, which is negative 12. Next, you have 3 times 0 times negative 3, which is 0. 2 times 1 times negative 1 is negative 2. And 4 times 2 times 1 is positive 8. So this simplifies to give you negative 9 minus 6, which is a D sub y of negative 15. From here, find D sub z. So your x values are not going to change. They're going to stay the negative 1, 2, 3. Y values don't change. They stay 2, 0, negative 4. Z values become your answers of 1, 0, 2. Rewrite the first two columns. Negative 1, 2, 3. and 2, 0, negative 4. First multiplying the negative 1, 0, and 2, that gives you 0. Then you have 2, 0, and 3, which is 0. 1, 2, and negative 4 give you negative 8. Then you're going to multiply 3 times 0 times 1, which is 0. Negative 4 times 0 times negative 1 is 0. And 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that's going to give us negative 8 minus 8, which is a d sub z of negative 16. So our answer for this one is going to be d sub x over d, comma, d sub y over d, comma, d sub z over d. So that's going to give us 8 over 10, comma, negative 15 over 10, comma, negative 16 over 10. These all simplify. The 8 and the 10 are divisible by 2, so that's 4/5. Negative 15 and 10 are divisible by 5, so that's negative 3/2. And negative 16 and 10 are both divisible by 2 to give you negative 8 over 5. So 4/5, comma, negative 3/2, comma, negative 8/5 is your answer for example 3.